humans, and he creates them with minds. And the reason he creates them with minds is so that they can think about what it means to be God. When God made man, he made man in his own image. Yeah? So what we've got there, and it says it in the Bible, we've got a state where it goes from mind to matter to humans to the concept of God. It's a circle. It's a cycle of life. And when we start viewing life and creation and God in terms of, say, abstract things, science will say it's abstract. They will say, if we start viewing God in terms of mathematics, then maybe it's true, science. But, which is strange enough, because if you take mathematics out of science, and it's supposed to be a pure abstraction, maths, made up, it's in our minds, but if we take it away, science says it doesn't exist, it's just made up, it's in your mind. But if you take mathematics away, you have no science. The whole of science is predicated on mathematics. Religion is far closer to the truth than science could ever be. And it spoke to us through sacred geometry. When you come to places like Church of England, any kind of Christian building, or you read the Bible, if you're Jewish, you're going to have the Old Testament, it's Jewish, Jesus, in the Bible, he was teaching people 30 years older than him. He was 13, 12, he was teaching people who were 40 years old. He was a genius. And a lot of their teaching in sort of Jewish, Kabbalic teaching, it's based around numerology. It's actually sacred language. And in Christian belief, we believe that Jesus is the Son of God. And he is. It's true. It's true. As above, so below. So within, so without. When Jesus professed the divine idea, and he spoke about faith, when he was speaking about faith, he was talking about belief. He knew the world to be true. He knew God to be true. And he had absolute faith that God was true because he understood sacred geometry. And he knew the truth. He was the truth. He was the embodiment of light. So I'm saying my God is in all things. It's in creation. Jesus comes along and he says, I am the light. I am the light. And I'm saying, yes, this guy, he's real. He's got to be real. He's the light. And I'm going to prove to you. And at this point, this is where science and religion meet. It's taken all this time, and we finally got there. Science and religion have finally just about got to a place where they can both agree that both of their arguments are true.
This is before the internet.
Yes, and I'm going to prove it to you. As above, so below. I am the light, the only sun, mirroring the sun in the sky, because what happens in the heavens comes first, and it's actualizing on earth. We are of the stars and planets, and the stars and planets are of God. And then we give birth to mind. Anyway, so sacred geometry. He said it's God, symbol for God. It's well known. We use that symbol for the risen Christ. It's a cross. 17, speaking 17, and I'll tell you why it's saying 17 to you. This is just proof, science, mathematics is science. 6 sides, 6 points, 3 points, 2 triangles, 17. It's the most random number there is. And when I spoke about light, this is the proof, 1 plus 7 is 8. It takes 8 minutes and 17 seconds for light to travel from the sun to earth. So we have the speed of light. So they were saying, I am the light, I am of the light, God is light, is in reasonable mind, and I am in the light. So we have a case for God there, He's actually given through sacred geometry, and it's taken us all this time to get the measurements from the sun to earth, to build up the mass, to prove, finally, after 6,000 years, that they were right all along. Here's an example of how science used to work in the old days. They would believe in, have you ever heard of Pompeii? Right, they had... Up Pompeii. They were well into their science, but their science was kind of like spiritual science. You know, they believed they could appease the gods. Yeah, the volcano would rumble. Yeah, the volcano would rumble, and the high priest would go, right, science, religion. Right, we've got to appease the volcano god, and we need to do it straight away. Otherwise, we're in big trouble. So what you need to do is you have to get your offerings. We're all going to carry them up to the volcano, and we're going to throw in the offerings. We're going to keep throwing in these offerings to the volcano, and when the god is pleased, he's going to stop. Yeah? And they went, right, yes. Okay, so we went up there. And eventually, yeah, sure, stop rumbling. And they took that as a sign. God is pleased. Our God is true. Every time we give it offerings, it doesn't matter. He might not be so pleased this time. It might take us a bit longer. But sooner or later, their God has been proven true. And their civilization hadn't left the hill long enough to find out that it was an active volcano. But sooner or later, you know, they believed blindly. They had blind faith that if they just kept spooning in offerings to the volcano God, that they would somehow be saved from the inevitable. And the inevitable was, it was an active volcano, it was going to blow up. It was actually going to happen. You know what I mean? If they had a little bit of knowledge about God and God's truth, they would have been able to avoid that, because they would have known that God made creation. And in doing so, he bound creation with law. Laws. That's what I'm saying. He created creation. Creation created creation. We could put it like that. It's a good way to put it. So, basically, when he's been creating these, these wonderful things, they're all bound by law. And when you can easily substitute the word Lord for law. He's God. What is God? He's the Almighty. He's the Alpha. He's the Omega. And he's bound up with law. His law is written, as much as it is in the Bible, as much as it is in any scripture around the world, it is written more in nature. It's self-evident. The laws we find in nature, they're self-evident. They're unbreakable. And if you do break them, then you pay the consequences. God's law is unshifting. It's common law. It's common to everybody. We speak about universalities. These are things that mean to everybody. And we all share this common law. And we all share this common law. So, the Trillion Trees Initiative, this isn't just about me and you, your relationship to creation, how you go about your life, and how I go about my life, how we all go about our lives. This is about how we interact with creation, and do we give creation the same afforded law we have afforded ourselves? We've been really good at creating law for ourselves, but not very good at observing and creating the law that reflected the laws that were already there for us to serve in the first place. We walked away from that. The day we got banished from Eden was the day that we walked away from the law. And ever since that day, we've been striving to get back to Eden. And it's kind of like to find out what God's law is. It's like we've gone through all of these different changes, all these different movements, and political uprising, social uprising. Civilizations have come, they've gone, and more often than not, they've left us because they didn't obey the law. Not the law that they wrote, or I wrote, or your politician wrote. The law that was already there waiting for us. It was there. And that's the whole mystery behind the Eden. With you can view it in many, many different ways, but basically Adam and Eve, they're in Eden. And it's a garden. And they ate from the fruit of the tree, from the knowledge of good and evil. And when they did so, they became a little bit as of gods. Or they took the knowledge of God into themselves, or thought themselves of God. They were banished. It wasn't some white dude, Zeus-like. Maybe it was. I wasn't there. I no empirical way to verify that. But he booted them out. So within, so without. The God was within themselves. The law was innate. The God that they were speaking to was the God within themselves. He didn't have to speak. The laws, they were there, and they were unshifting, they were unbreakable. So the moment they turned their back on that, it's a metaphor. They left the Garden of Eden. And we've been trying to get back ever since. And it's taken us however long. We finally got there. We've come full circle. When they had the fruit, Adam and Eve, it was kind of like they were the seeds of despotism. That's what I'm calling them, seeds of despotism. And I'm calling them the seeds of despotism in the same way that Bob Marley could say something like, all government is illegal. Because Bob Marley was a religious man, he was a spiritual man. And I'm not very religious, I'm not superstitious, I'm kind of a little bit spiritual. I have a very, very, very close bond with nature. And if nature is my God, which it is, and no one can argue me down on my definition of what God is, the existence of everything, then I have every reason to kind of stay with that kind of train of thought. Yes. So, the unshifting, unbinding, unmoving, unbreakable laws of God. You don't have to speak about them. They are there. They are axiomatic. They're self-evident. So when you turn your back on those, as we have done, when we destroyed 45% of all the native woodlands on Earth, that's despotism. That's not just criminal by our own standards of justice. That's criminal by his law. And he spelled it. And every single pastor, every single political leader, every royal figure, anyone who ever said they had any power over you, quoted this Bible. Yes, they quoted you the Bible. And it's fine, there's a lot of truth in the Bible. I don't have a problem with the Bible or religion. It's philosophy for the masses. I love philosophy. It's good. But what they were preaching was short of the truth. They said you had to accept the existence of God on blind faith. No, you don't. What part of existence can't you see or can't you, experience? And we're all here to experience it. You don't have to take that on blind faith. When Jesus speaks about faith, he's talking about belief and believing. He knows that the God is within himself. So within, so without. Now you can look at that in an idealistic way, or idealism in a immaterial sense, or you could look at that in a material way. One is empirical, one is rational. He meant in both ways. Yeah? The mind of God, the matter of the world, to the matter of our bodies, to the mind of our minds, and back to God, back to creation. So they're unshifting, the laws. They are the Alpha, they are the Omega. And they can't be broken. And when you do break them, then everything falls apart. And that's what's happening in the world at the moment. So here we go. Here's the conflicty, sort of boring science. Since industrialisation, we have cleared 45% of all the native woodlands on the planet, which equate to 2.8 trillion or 6 trillion trees. That's nearly half. 45%, we'll say 45, 46, 47, or whatever, quick maths, I should be better at maths, but it's there or thereabouts. Same sort of percentage of wildlife species and biological species that are kind of plant life based. So that's nearly half of all life on Earth. has gone extinct since industrialisation. According to the dictates of science, which is nowhere near the truth because it's only approximations, the empirical world can only ever bring you close to the truth. It isn't the absolute truth. You need to be rational about that. So we cleared all these woodlands, and we did it, 250 years? And in the same time, carbon dioxide has gone up in the atmosphere by, I think it's 300 parts per million. So we've gone from 0.02% carbon dioxide in the atmosphere to 0.05%. Now, although we've been steadily increasing carbon dioxide since industrialisation, and it's gone up, every single graph you can study as many graphs you like, they go up like that, and it shows quite clearly that it's been a steady increase, and that's cool. We've had a steady increase. We can get that. Our science, we can get our heads around that. There's more, with more fuel being burnt, it's going up. Science is telling you that is causing global warming and that it's causing climate change. But at the same time, as we've been burning all these fossil fuels, we've been cutting down forests. Now, fine, I know that fossil fuels are really, really bad. I'm not arguing with that one iota. 1 billion cars equates to 1 trillion people. That's how much oxygen a car will use and how much CO2 it will produce. It will produce the same as 1 trillion people. Could you live on a planet with 1 trillion people? Well, I could live on a planet with 1 trillion more trees. And if we don't get 1 more trillion trees, and if they don't start going in the ground within the next 5 years, 2, 3, 4, 5